Dan Kelly, welcome to Australian Musician.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Uh,
Real
we're,
pleasure.
talk- we're talking to you about a new album that you got coming out on September 6th called Goldfeels. Um, over what period of time were these songs written? How far back do the songs go?
Well, probably a few years. It's been a long time since my last record, but I didn't write anything for quite a while. I sort of busied myself playing with other people, and then I moved to the country, and then there was the whole smudge of the pandemic, which was a couple of years where I didn't really write stuff. It was probably a year after that that I was like, all right, it's really time, and started to write them. So the album was finished about 6 months ago, but it was really done over the course of a year. And I really wrote a lot of it almost to a schedule in that year, where working with my friend Dan Luscombe, who was producing the record with me, he just was like, come in, time to do it, dude. You know what I mean? Time to do some music. I'll, come in 2 weeks. I've got a studio. So then I was just like, okay. And I just finished stuff really quickly, having that kind of pressure. So I'd write a couple of songs or finish them and go in, record them, go home, come back a couple of weeks later, and sort of did that over 6 months. So, yeah, like a lot of my stuff, it's sort of a long mixture of my life and the songs rather than just me sitting in a room writing a bunch of songs
Yeah.
and choosing 10 or 11 songs. That it's a they're a lot more they're a lot more tied to my general day to day. They kind of come out all mixed up together. That's why my records are kind of generally follow a certain theme.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah, I hope that.
was there a theme or concept right from the start, or did it just emerge as you were writing songs?
I think it's interesting. Yeah, I went through a really hard period where my dad died, and it was a pandemic, and a bunch of stuff happens, which, as you know, it tends to happen in big clusters the older you get. Just um, and I got incredibly down about that for quite a long time, and sort of had another year of lockdown to deal with a lot of that stuff. And so what I did, which is I've never done before, and it's what people will often say to you if you're having a hard time. They're like, "Oh, write a song about it," or write. But I've always been a bit like, "Oh, no, I don't know, it's just not my." But after about a year, I was just like, I actually have to write my way out of this funk. I suppose that you not that it was at all funky, but a really dark period. So I kind of constructed the songs to do with that period of time, which was probably a period of time that covered me coming to the country in 2018 to Castlemaine, Campbell's Creek, and then yeah, and then right to the period after the pandemic, and then involving that. It's not a lockdown record, but it's more like it. All the songs pretty well cover the themes of sort of grief and country paranoia and loss, but written in my kind of mythological way, um, and very much tied into the landscape here, which tends to affect the way I write. So it's kind of written from the point of view of looking out over the bush from this house, where I was sort of had no choice but to just look out of the bush for 2 years. And yeah, so the theme, it pretty well presented itself around how I was feeling and my location.
Yeah.
And of course, not every song's the same, um, but they do all tap into. That's why I call the record "Gold Feels," because I felt shit really hard, and I've lived in the Goldfields region. I was, and but so it's a record from here that's not done on a banjo. If you, even though I did play banjo in one song, it's not like a trad. It's not the kind of bush band kind of vibe you might associate with this part of Australia, which is very lots of gold mines, and it's got um, but it's definitely influenced by the geography and the times. Um, is that Did I answer your question then? I do tend to.
Um,
Yeah.
Australia has a history of exploring landscape in music, going back to the days of Percy Grainger and then Peter Sculthorpe, and even in modern times, Shane Howard, Ivor Davies. Have you had an interest in that kind of music history?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I would categorize an Australian sound, a particular Australian sound, as that open sound. I mean, for me, key records that would have an open plains Australian sound would be, uh, there's definitely a bunch of Midnight Oil songs that of the more expansive Diesel and Dust period. You've got stuff like the Cruel Sea records, which, even though you can tie that into the Americana idea, I think the Cruel Sea, I really see just, songs like it. This Is Not the Way Home, or they're more kind of surf instrumental ones. Uh, they really capture the landscape. Wide Open Road by the Triffids is, sort of undeniably got that big landscape sound. When I listen to the Pigram Brothers, I can very much dial into the geography, the Broome area, and all the cultures that go into their music. You could, there's so much of it that's just touching on the surface. So yes, I definitely agree. That the landscape is, it's if I end up being connected to that in any way, I'd be stoked. This record, it sounds a bit more claustrophobic in terms of it sounds more sort of, it's like the landscape. It's a muted grey and brown, and sort of muted eucalypt kind of vibe here, with lots of kind of quartz in the ground, and mud and quartz, and it's a hard country. It's all been picked over and dug through, um, and I think in the way my record sounds a bit more like that, rather than a more lush or expansive kind of sounding landscape Australian record. But uh, yeah,
Yeah.
that's yeah, um, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
know if that,
having said that, and speaking about music inspired by where you are, there's
yeah.
a track, Lakes of Menindee, which is a New South Wales area, a song which is a very evocative song on the album. Um, did you have childhood experiences there that have stayed with you?
No, I've never been there.
Oh,
What inspired that song was going to see a documentary about the Menindee Lakes, and I've kept an eye on them, because they are, if you in politics, they'll talk about a bellwether seat or something, which really reflects what's going on, almost for the, like, where everything hinges almost on the result of one particular seat, or how that swings tends to affect the way everything's going to go. And I really feel like the Menindee Lakes really reflect what's going on with the Australian environment, particularly with the really long run of droughts that we had. Um, they got to the point where all those fish kills along there, and then it pretty well dried up. And they're this massive, expensive thing. I've read about them and looked at. I went to a documentary and just watched, and it was just full of sort of. It was just the muddy river, and you know skulls of dead animals, and the local people just going, we've never seen it so dead. And then that was pretty well at the end of that quite intense bushfire droughty period from 2016 to 2019. So it had really died, and I went to see the documentary about it. And then the pandemic happened, like, almost immediately after that, and the big fires happened just after I went to see that. The devastating ones. And so then a couple of years later, and a lot of other stuff had happened for me personally, then those lakes started to fill up. That, we had those immense kind of rainy seasons up the coast, and I just saw that as the lakes drying and almost dying, and then finally filling up 3 years later, just seemed to really represent to me that period of time where I went really dark and then found my way out. So I use them as I suppose, a device. I don't know if I don't have a literature degree, so I'm not sure if that's the right term, to represent a lot of personal change. And, you can talk about the cycle of, fire and flood, the classic Australian thing. But yeah, I imagine with a title like that, if you clicked on it, you might get expect a more John Williamson style kind of, you know, or Bulla McCanka kind of style lyric. But for me, it's incredibly personal, even though it's sort of set in a place that's it exists, but it's also in my imagination because I've not been there.
Yeah. Regional Crisis, another track on the album, sounds like it came out of a jam. How much of that was written originally, and how much came out of the studio?
Well, that was it. That was another interesting one. That was actually, there was just a riff that I had in that song that I had carried with me for a few years that had I just found, because I try and record everything I do now because I don't have to, if I don't nail it straight away, an idea, then I'll forget it. And so I had that, and I was trying to learn how to play a drum machine, and came up with this thing that had a real, I would probably categorize it as almost trip hop, not in a kind of a Portishead way, but maybe more a DJ Shadow. It's got a breakbeat. It's like a heavy breakbeat feel. And the combination of that breakbeat and that riff, to me, just sounded like it sounded like a bushfire. I just imagined they were almost siren-like, and it was, and I imagined a bush, like a fire truck sort of trundling in towards a big fire, and the kind of sense of dread. So then I constructed the track around that. I got actually Peter Luscombe, who's played, with everybody, who plays with Paul Kelly. I play with Peter Luscombe in the Paul Kelly band, and sometimes in the Rock Whiz band, but, played with the Sorrows, and he's done session work forever, from the 70s, from the early 80s. I got him in to try and see if he could emulate that kind of breakbeat feel, because I didn't want to just use a loop. I think it's fine for hip hop, but it doesn't sound very human to me when I use it with my music. So, and again, this is all part of me learning to play piano, which is the task I set myself over that lockdown period, which is to learn how to play piano with both hands and sing at the same time. So all of the record is driven by me learning a different way of playing, putting chords together just by naturally learning to play piano, and experimenting with different ways to play. So I got really influenced by New Orleans kind of late 50s, early 60s kind of proto R&B rock and roll. And so I was learning a lot of those riffs. So that kind of riff feeling comes in over the top of this bushfire jam, which has kind of got almost like a Hendrix kind of bend. And then Dan Luscombe went really nuts in the studio, and we ran a lot of stuff through various types of kind of limiting and harmonic kind of generating, so that we really had this, by hitting just big chords on the piano in a stacked way, we had a real crunchy kind of almost bushfiery kind of drone underneath it. So yeah, I tried to kind of construct a live version of something that captured the doom feel, but it's still kind of groovy, and then we put a detuned saxophone over it because no one could actually play the low one. Ben Woolley played on that, and I like it because it doesn't really sound like anything else that I've done, and there's none of my singing on it, which is, can actually be a relief if you're not super enamored with the sound of your own voice. You're like, oh, I'm really enjoying this one. Actually, it's cruising. It's got a feeling, but it's not suffused with a whole lot of words.
So tell me about the piano that you wrote on. Was it an old acoustic piano or digital?
It's a 70s. I basically bought this house here 6 years ago. I was like, I had a small amount of money for a deposit. And I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm cooked. I'll be living in a share house for the rest of my life. So I obviously went to a lot of regional areas where you could maybe get a cheap house, and got one in Castlemaine here. So I managed to borrow enough money off the bank to get a mortgage on this house in the bush. And but I borrowed an extra 5 grand because I was like, I have to have a piano in the house. And so I got this sort of 70s, that's a 70s Yamaha.
Okay.
And what I find is that with the Yamaha pianos, it's or generally pianos from that period, like the black ones look great, but they sound a bit more tinkly to me, whereas those brown wood ones they've just got a bit more of a muted, gentle sound, which I really enjoy. Because I just like playing soft, big chords and moving around them a bit, as opposed to kind of a more kind of wandering right hand kind of lots of notes style. Because I physically can't do it, but I've never liked that anyway. Um, so yeah, that's my piano, and I really wrote the whole record on piano, just forcing myself up at 6 in the morning and to write for an hour. And I figured out that that's actually my time. I can go back to bed, but it's like the time for me to actually connect some words and chords, which is really essential for me to actually. It doesn't become a song unless I almost kind of stick those two things together straight away. Even if then I sit on that for a few months and so. And I found out that the morning is when that seems to happen really naturally. I'd go and write 10 minutes, reward myself with a cigarette, go and stare at the bush, go back in, do another bit. After an hour, I was like, that's probably what I got. I can do other music things during the day or at night. I play with lots of other bands. I can listen to a lot of music. I can tool around in the little home studio thing I've got. But for actually generating songs, it seems to be really early in the morning, which I've discovered quite late in life. you know.
So are you confident enough to play piano live?
Yeah, so that's what this regional crisis band is, which is Dan Kelly's regional crisis, which was the guys from Marlon Williams' band, the Yarra Benders, Ben Woolley, Gus Agars, and Dan Luscombe, who's played with the Drones and Paul Kelly and Black Eyed Susans and everyone, and producers Amel and the Sniffers and Courtney and Barnett. But those, the brief was I'm playing piano. It doesn't, and because I just needed to keep forcing myself into new things, for excitement and just to feel like I want to do music again. Um, so so I play piano. I play piano on all these songs, and it's been really fun. What I've found, because I've gone out and I'm doing it solo too, and that's incredibly hard because if I just get the slightest thing wrong, there's no leaning out of it. Like, whereas if the band's playing and I get a couple of things wrong, you just don't have to play too much. And with left hand with the piano, it can really interfere with the bass unless you've got something incredibly intricately sort of locked in or simply locked in. So you play a lot less left hand when you're playing live, and you can sit back a little bit. If you miss a couple of chords, it doesn't matter. But the solo stuff's been quite tricky. It's been at times brutal, but I've just like forced myself into it because I want to do it. So I've been playing the piano in the band for about a year, and I really like it. I quite like sitting down. I actually find it a lot more. I can actually hold my space, as the modern kids would say, a lot better just sitting on the piano than kind of standing around with an electric guitar. Which, even though I've been doing it my whole life, I feel a little bit more at sea. Like I don't have a lot of rock moves, you know what I mean? Playing guitar, whereas sitting down at the piano, I'm, there's a sort of a command and calm that I feel, even though I'm sort of the back of my brain is racing, trying to remember all the stuff I've got to play. I've been really enjoying it. I've been playing a bit of piano with Jess Ribeiro here and there, who's just put out a beautiful record called Summer of Love, and just playing just really minimalist big chords, just tied in with her kind of sort of natural timing. Yeah, because we've been doing a lot of stuff without a drummer, and I've been really enjoying that too. Just trying to get my playing to that kind of uh, like sort of shared headspace with the other musicians where not much happens, but there's a lot of weight to a live piano. If you just in that more sparse sense and you hit one low note, it sounds immense. You are the bass player, I suppose, in that situation. So yeah, it's been a real journey for me, and then I'll jump on the guitar for a few songs and have a play, and it's fun to do that. That's a more comfortable thing. But yeah, so it's I'm kind of I'm working on being a sort of antipodean sort of Randy Newman. I mean, it'd be great to be Nina Simone, but that's that's not going to happen. You know, she was too good.
Mm. So, is there a track on the album that's closer to your heart than others?
I think Lakes of Menindee was is feels good to me. I mean, in terms of like that felt like a change, and it's a really important personally. My dad's kind of in that song in a way, uh, so it's kind of hard to sing, but it's also has a. I'm probably more emotionally connected to that than any song I've been before, because this is a much more. Even though all the records I've put out are essentially sort of doing my life in a kind of a mythologized sense. This one is much more. It's not literal, but it's much more connected to a sort of deep emotions. I suppose it's less clever and more uh, from the guts. I suppose, even though I've definitely given it a sort of patina of complication. It's so that one, I really like. I'm just trying to think which songs I really like. Golden Shoes, which to me has a more of kind of a stiff record, sort of Nick Lowe feeling about it. Um, I was really pleased with that one. I mean, what I enjoy is even though the process was fairly long, I was going a bit Bob Dylan in terms of I get the rest of the band in because I work with a lot of different people. Um, some of the people who are still my band were on the record, but like Gus and Dan and Ben, but I work with a lot of different people, and I was really just coming in with this song fresh, even though I might have been thinking about it for 6 years, like actually finished and saying to them, "This is the song," and then basically rolling tape, and so then none that way, none of it's really perfect, um, but I can still hear people working it out and getting excited about it, and I'd rather that. I mean, it's a lovely idea to be able to go on tour, get really great at a bunch of songs and come in and nail them. But for me, coming out of the pandemic, it's been so little music for 2 years, and um, I didn't have an opportunity to do that, and I needed a new record anyway before I could tour. So I really I just enjoy hearing that it's not perfect, and I was really careful, even though it was done mostly on computer, to not kind of massage anything too much. Like the Lakes of Menindee vocal is just I made them do the song without any lyrics. I was just like, this is the vibe. And they were like, can you just sing it to us? We don't know what the fuck it's about. So then I just gave them like a handheld microphone version so they could hear what the song was that they just played. And then that turned out, even though it's sort of quite grainy and we really hadn't worked on a sound, I was just like, that's the vocal. Wow. I just essentially did the same thing that I was getting them to do, which is just sang it for the first time in front of people. And I was like, that sounds, it sort of had a weight to it that I didn't want to recreate with a beautiful microphone and the chance to kind of overdo it, which I mean, I'm probably my own worst critic, but that I've definitely overdone stuff before, particularly, in that first flush of everyone figuring out what you could do with Pro Tools and sort of stuff like that. I was painting big sound sculptures, but you can really kill the vibe if you don't if you don't allow it to have mistakes and breathe. Well, my kind of stuff, it depends, you know. There's all different types of music. So yeah, but I'm really look, I'm really happy with all the songs on the record, and I think I'm happy because it's done. And in a way, when you don't write songs every day, and it's such a blessed feeling that I've actually managed to do it again. Like I just like I'm still like, wow, I can still do this, and uh, and in a way that I'm happy with, and other people seem to like, you know. Um, so it's very close to my heart, even all the songs, because I did them. uh,
Yeah.
that answer, yeah.
Well, Dan, I've been really enjoying the album myself. I think you've done a fantastic job. It's out on September 6th, and we look forward to seeing you out on the road playing this music.
Hey, thanks a lot. It's a real pleasure to talk to you. Thanks for asking good questions. That really helps. And yeah, good luck to you. I'll see you at a show, hopefully.
Yeah. Right. See you, mate.
Take it easy. See ya.